Calificas para ser legal. ¿Quieres saber? Solo llama al abogado Andrés Mejer.
Good morning. My name is Andres Mejer, and welcome to this English version of our weekly radio show Para Ser Legal. Today, we're talking about all things DUI, how it affects immigrants, Senator Menendez's comments regarding DUI and how immigrants are being treated, common defense strategies for DUI. I'm going to give you a real-life case example of a case that, we were able to defeat and get the DUI charges dismissed when other attorneys advised our client to plead guilty. But first, in the news in the past couple of weeks, let's talk about two nice pieces. One, $1.6 million in college tuition was given in the state of New Jersey to dreamers. Those are people that graduated high school or finished the GED here in New Jersey. They did at least 3 years of high school. They applied for college, were accepted to college, and they applied and received a grant, like many students did. I know I did when I was going to school. There were 1,209 applicants. 513 of them were awarded some amount. In total, 150 Rutgers students got about $623,000. St. Peter's University was the second biggest recipient. They received about $132,000. And Bergen Community College, the single largest college and beneficiary of this program, got about $40,000. Now, obviously, that's a little more than 75% of the monies that were awarded. So the other 25% went to a variety of smaller institutions. But at the end of the day, 513 students were able to go to school and were able to defer some of their college expenses, which is what every other U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident can do. They can always apply and receive funding. It's the DACA students or the dreamers that historically have had no access to any assistance. Second good piece of news. There was a study by Wallet Hub which compared all 50 states. They looked at what was the impact of immigrants on the economy of the state. And ironically enough, not ironically, but surprisingly, New Jersey was the number 3 for the most positive impact that immigrants made in the workforce and in their state's economy, after California and New York. Now, I know in New Jersey we have a lot of immigrants, but to be honest, we are like number 9 and number 10 in the country. I did not expect that such a large impact. So that was a surprise to me. New Jersey is number 3 after California and New York, both of which have a lot more immigrants and also have a larger economy. California alone is, I think, the 5th largest economy in the world, just that state. Now, on to the subject at hand, DUIs. Specifically, what's a DUI? Driving while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Senator Menendez was recently interviewed, and the interview was really more about, funding, because the government was shut down. Was there going to be another shutdown? There were negotiations ongoing to fund the government, and one of the sticking points was the number of beds that ICE wants. Now, what does that mean, number of beds? Number of detention cells, number of jails that they're going to get funding in order to detain and deport as many immigrants as possible. And Senator Menendez was asked, should ICE get all the bed requests that he wanted? And he went on to say, ICE really is already 8,000 over budget than what they're given for. So his comments were, doesn't matter what ICE is requesting, they're going to go over it. The larger thing is, what's the mentality that has changed in the Trump administration, and that all immigrants are now considered criminals. Just by virtue of being here, they're considered a criminal. Part of that is because of, under Obama, there were priorities, meaning if an immigrant finds him or herself in ICE custody under Obama, they were going to evaluate, are they a danger to the community? Are they a criminal? Are they a threat to society? And there was a hierarchy. Violent criminals did not get released. Violent criminals were placed in removal proceedings. But a person who has been here 15 years, for example, never arrested, no negative history whatsoever, would not have been placed in removal proceedings just because they were here illegally or without permission. So that mentality has completely changed. And he said in particular with how DUIs are being treated. He said, look, DUIs are not crimes. What he really meant to say, I believe, is they're not violent crimes, number one. Number two, the context is in New Jersey, a DUI, driving under the influence, is not considered a crime. It's a traffic violation, albeit a traffic violation with serious consequences. One can go to jail in some cases for up to 6 months, have, $8, $9, $10,000 worth of expenses associated with a DUI. The consequences can be severe. You can lose your license, you can go to jail, you can get high fines, but it's not a crime. But immigration is federal. And the majority of states in the union do consider driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol a crime. In New Jersey, there's been many efforts to do the same thing, meaning as criminal defense attorneys, we prefer a jury trial. We prefer the case to be heard, to be considered as a crime. For the simple reason is today, if somebody wants to fight a DUI and goes to trial, it's only before a judge. We don't go in front of a jury. The judge decides the legal issues and decides the factual issues. Generally speaking, in most criminal scenarios, trials, the judge is only involved on the legal issues. The factual issues is decided by the jury. The jury decides, well, do the facts meet the legal definition as the judge has explained it for a DUI or for an assault or for a murder or whatever the crime particularly is. It's the ultimate trier of fact is the jury. But in New Jersey, that's not the case. And that's one of the principal reasons why, in my opinion, a DUI is still treated as a traffic violation. It's also another reason why conviction rates are so high for DUIs, because a lot of the judges were formerly prosecutors. And they take a very hard stance on DUIs. Now, that isn't to say they're not winnable. They are, and we've won lots of them. But every case is unique, and every case is a little bit different. But what Senator Menendez was saying is, listen, under Obama, DUI is not a violent crime, and somebody who, for example, pled guilty to a DUI might not even be placed in removal proceedings. Now, it all depends on the timing. If someone is arrested today for DUI and gets transferred to ICE custody, well, that's a pending charge, not yet been convicted. But if he was convicted, that's a problem. But if the conviction was yesterday, it's very different than 15 years ago. If I was arrested and pled guilty or found guilty of a DUI 15 years ago, and now I'm in ICE custody, well, I can make an argument that I'm rehabilitated, that I found the error of my ways, and I never repeated that incident again. In 15 years, I was never arrested, no other DUIs. I've been rehabilitated, and chances are I will be able to get bailed out. In immigration, they call it a bond. I will be able to get an immigration bond, and an immigration judge will give me a bond. It may be a high amount, but he or she will give me one. If it's pending, or if it just happened at, it's in this climate, it's much harder. Everything is harder in terms of getting clients out that are detained in detention while they're defending their immigration case. In some cases, they're defending their criminal case and their immigration case at the same time. I don't believe that's appropriate. I think that should definitely change. I believe there's a constitutional issue there, because if I'm charged with a crime and the criminal judge says, you know what, you don't need bail. And then immigration judge says, you know what, I'm not going to release you because you're a danger to the community. The government should not get two shots at that on the two different forums, in my opinion. That's one of those issues that are fundamental and need to be addressed, and likely will be addressed in the federal district court. But for now, what are we talking about? DUIs. So what is a DUI? Let's talk about 3 common defense strategies to a DUI, how to beat a DUI, mistakes that most attorneys make. So first of all, we have to define, well, what is a DUI? In New Jersey, statute is 39:4-50, and it says essentially that in order to be found guilty of a DUI, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a very high showing. beyond a reasonable doubt, I'd say about 85% or higher, that I did the following: that I was operating a motor vehicle on a public road while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Now, if I had a beer and I drove, I'm under the influence of alcohol, but the amount of alcohol that I consumed didn't make me drunk. So there needs to be beyond the legal limit, which is 0.08 in New Jersey. For a first violation, the legal limit matters because there's 3 different tiers depending on the level of alcohol in my system: 0.08 to 0.10, 0.10 to 0.15, and over 0.15. And if I'm convicted, the consequences can be significant, depending on whether it's a first offense, second offense, or a third offense. I'm looking at over $1,500 or more in fines, an insurance surcharge of $1,000 for 3 years, or $3,000 total. My insurance will double, triple, or I'll be non-renewed. I could go to jail for up to 6 months. Again, first offense, usually no jail. Second offense, minimum of 1 day to 5 days. Third offense, 6 months, mandatory, no discretion. Half of it can be served in a patient detox program, but I'm still being detained or jailed. So operating motor vehicle under the influence, and the level of alcohol was 0.08 or more. So 3 common defense strategies. First, officer has to have a reasonable suspicion to pull me over. So common reasons are, well, I was speeding over the speed limit. My insurance was suspended or expired. My registration was expired. My license was suspended. Don't forget, officer can run my plates. By running the plates, they'll know who's the owner of the vehicle, and they'll be able to see, is the insurance expired? Is the registration expired? Is there a registration? What about the owner of the vehicle? Is his or her license suspended? So all of those can be reasons for why they pull me over. Driving, crossing the line without a blinker, driving too close to the car behind you, not stopping at a red light or at a stop sign, not having your lights on, or your lights are not working. That's a very common reason. So before you enter the vehicle, well, you shouldn't drive drunk under any circumstances. If you're borrowing someone else's car, it's not your car, just make sure that your license is up to date, your insurance is up to date, so is the registration, and your lights are working. Let's not make it easy for the officer to pull you over. Now, if the officer pulls you over and can't justify his reason, it's a low level, it has to be reasonable suspicion. If he or she can't justify the reason for the stop, whatever information the officer discovers gets dismissed. Hence, so does your case. So does the charges against you. I'll give you a perfect example. So we had a trial where officer pulled my client over because his lights were not working. It was at night, in violation of statute 39:3-66, maintenance of lamps. Well, when we asked the officer on the stand what was the base, what lights weren't working, he said, well, around the license plate, there were 2 lights on each end. Those were not working. Well, the statute does not require to have lights around the license plate. You need to have 3 brake lights, and you need to have 2 front lights. That's what the statute requires. Just because a car has 2 lights and one of them may not be working is not a sufficient basis to pull them over. The judge agreed. All charges went away. So, reasonable suspicion to pull you over. That's number 1. Number 2, no probable cause for the arrest. So when an officer pulls you over, he or she's going to ask you for your license, your registration, your insurance. Chances are, look, if you're in the Jersey Shore, it's Friday night, it's 3 a.m, he's going to suspect you were drinking. So he's going to ask you, have you been drinking? Where'd you come from? Where'd you go? You have the right not to answer. Other than this is who I am, with all due respect, officer, I'm not going to answer any more of your questions. Officers will always say your words were slurry. I should say almost always. The reports almost always read the same. Your eyes are bloodshot and red. And that could be allergies. It could be that you're tired. Your words, you're slurring your words. Well, if for most of our clients who are not native English speakers, speaking a foreign language you might not be as clear as you would be in your own language. Now, officer is going to typically tell you to get out of the car and is going to instruct you to do 3 different sets of exams. There are many exams that he could do, but only 3 of them have been quote unquote standardized by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA. What the officer is not going to tell you is you're under no obligation to do these exams. You do have to give a breath sample if the officer arrests you. If you don't, you get charged for a separate violation. But the 3 sobriety tests are not mandatory, and the officer is not going to tell you that. He's not going to say, hey, do you mind if we do some exams? I've not seen a single video or read a single report that said that. Instead, they're going to tell you, step out of the car, please. We're going to be doing some exams. It's a command, and you have the right to say no. Now, there are 3 different types of exams. Given the time that we have today, we're not going to go into the details of what those are: the one-legged stand, the walk-in turn test, looking for nystagmus in the eyes. So we're not going to talk about those today. The point is that the officer has to demonstrate the exams, like the one-legged stand and the walk-in turn test, has to explain them to you. You have to understand them, and then you need to do them. And the officer is going to observe and looking for, did you do them in the way that they were instructed? Now, if the officer did instruct them properly, they can't knock you for not doing it properly. Same thing with the explanation. So when we, as the criminal defense attorneys, we look at the police report, we look at the video if there is one, and I love videos because at the end of the day, what's the expression? Picture's worth 1,000 words. So the video will show me what happened. The video will show me what the officer said. There's usually some disagreement between the video and the report. Invariably there is. But the question is that difference? Does it rise to the level that a judge can't trust the officer's opinion that you were drunk? That's really what it comes down to. So one example, I had a report where the officer referred to my client with 3 different names. Only one of them was his. So that was a cut and paste job where he just didn't replace the names correctly. He took information from different reports and put it together. So us looking at it, we're like, well, what confidence do we have that you properly analyzed our client when on one line he's George, on the next line he's Jeff, and on the third line he's something else? And the judge agreed, and that case got dismissed. The DUI got dismissed. But there's lots of reasons why you might not do well in the sobriety test. You might have vertigo. You might have had a leg or back injury. You might be under medication that can negatively impact you. High blood pressure, diabetic. There's lots of reasons why the sobriety tests can give false results. They call it a false positive. They are only accurate 67 to 70% of the time. That means almost a third of the cases, NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration Association, is aware that in almost 1 out of 3, the results are going to be inaccurate. So you're better off not doing it at all. Don't give the police evidence that they could use against you. Third defense strategy is on the vehicle. Well, let me rephrase that. The manner in which that the state is going to try to prove your blood alcohol content. The most common one is your breath sample. Now, the breath sample, it's after you're arrested. They take you back to the station. They have to observe you for a 20-minute period. Make sure there's no food or other items in your mouth. Make sure you don't vomit or anything else. Then they have to take the exam at least twice, see what the results are, and is it over 0.08 or below. Another one is a blood test or a urine test. Those are more common if there's an accident and you're taken to the hospital, meaning police officer can't take you to arrest you and take you to the station for you to give a breath sample, and they can't bring the machine into the hospital. So in those circumstances, they'll give you a blood and urine test. In other states, a blood test or urine test are more common. In New Jersey, it's mostly the breath sample, with the exception of, like I said, if if there was an accident. Now, I'm going to group these categories together, meaning the ways to determine your level of alcohol. Each of them are separate, but for purposes of this conversation, because we're limited in time, what we're looking at is, okay, was the machine that gave the breath sample, or the machine that the tests that analyzed the blood or the urine, was it in properly working condition? Was the individual using it properly trained in its use? Was the certifications still current? Did the proofs and documents saved in the proper chain of custody? For example, if a nurse gave you a blood sample, well, did they do the right kit, or did they do one like they do it in the hospital? The officer has to bring a particular kit that can prevent contamination. Chain of custody. Who was the nurse who got it? Who gave it to the police officer? Who gave it to the technician that tested it? Are there medical reasons why you might get false positives? And there are many of them. I talked about diabetes, high blood pressure, but there's medicines also that can make it seem like you're drunk when you're not. So those are common defense strategies. In the last couple minutes, and I only got a couple minutes left, let me talk about in a case we had for George. Now, George is not his real name, but he was charged for DUI in Lakewood. Video showed he was drunk. There was no doubt that he was drunk. His prior attorney said, listen, you're drunk. You might as well just plead guilty. So he didn't want to plead guilty. He came to us. We evaluated the evidence, and here's what happened. He drove to a liquor store. He bought alcohol. He consumed alcohol. Police came. They saw the car was still there, apprehended him, and arrested him. Now, there was no question that he was drunk, but if you remember, the state must prove he was operating a motor vehicle while under the influence and over the limit. There was no evidence that George was operating the motor vehicle. When the police showed up, the vehicle was off. The key was not in the ignition. The officer had no information, no basis to conclude, well, was George drunk and then drove to the liquor store for more alcohol? Or did he drove to the liquor store, consume alcohol, get drunk, and then didn't drive before the police pulled him over? Well, not pulled him over because he was already stopped. Because the state couldn't prove it, the DUI was dismissed. Yes, it's technical. Again, it's not about were you drunk or not. It's about, can the state prove beyond a reasonable doubt each of the elements of the crime? If you're an immigrant, the consequences are much worse for you. If you're convicted of a DUI, you may not get released from jail. ICE will take you. A judge may not give you bail. They call it bond. In some circumstances, if you're convicted for more than one DUI, you may be disqualified from certain forms of relief. It can result in your deportation. Don't just go to court, say, it's only a fine, it's $1,000, $50, I'll pay it, no problem. The immigration consequences are so much worse than the criminal ones. My name is Andres Mejer. Thank you for listening to the English version of our radio program, Para Ser Legal. If you have any questions about immigration or about DUI, we do have a book specifically on DUIs, common strategies that most attorneys miss, and we have a book on immigration, Para Ser Legal, how to get legal and what are the most common ways to do that. You can contact us at 888-888-0305. You can find us online or on Facebook at Andres Mejer Law, LAW, Andres Mejer Law. We're here for you. 888-888-0305. Until next week.
Calificas para ser legal, ¿quieres saber? Solo llama al abogado Andrés Mejer.